Hello, everybody out there in workers' comp video world. I'm Mike Sullivan. I'm here with Jake Jacobsmeyer. Hi, Jake.
Hi there, Michael.
Good to see you alive and well.
Good to be alive and well.
Yeah, you almost weren't. That's why we're here to talk about it. Jake had an encounter with COVID, and it was so dramatic and intense and informative that I wanted to bring him on our weekly broadcast and ask him to tell the story. If you're listening to this, you're probably a Sullivan & Comp subscriber or one of the firm's clients, because we've been doing it since COVID came out, the whole series of webinars. And we've gotten pretty deep on a lot of the different topics. I think, Jake, you've listened to some of them. You know, we've, the governor's order, when to provide a claim form, site claims, when it's compensable, employment law issues, return to work. So we've done like 12 of these or something like that. And
I think this is number 11 is what we said on the announcement.
Yeah. And so we're doing one a week. There's just so much to talk about. It's crazy. And things keep changing every week. So this is part of that series, but it's different because what we've been doing is webinars. And this is the first time you get to see my pretty face. Up until now, it's just been words. But they show the picture of me, and the picture is when I still had hair. And I keep trying to get them to change the picture. And they Photoshop my teeth too in the picture. So this is the sad truth you see before you, ladies and gentlemen, if you've been pictured all these. This is as good as it gets. So so this is part of this series of webinars. And I also want to mention at the beginning that we have written a book about COVID. If you print it out, it'd be like 200 pages long. If you just look on any email from our firm or any ad you got for this, you'll see you could put it on your desktop. It's really cool. It covers everything about workers' comp and employment law, answers every question. It's always updated. You know, we update it daily. So we're hoping that it's used. About 1,000 people look at it per week. About 1,000 people look at these webinars per week. I mean, it's really, people need to know what's going on. And it's this crazy environment, man. Anyway, but to finish the introductions here. So I'm Mike Sullivan. I'm the principal of Michael Sullivan & Associates. We're a medium-sized firm with offices throughout the state. Do defense work. But I'm also the primary author of Sullivan & Comp, which is a legal treatise. It's like really big, 13 volumes or something like that. I think anything after like 11 volumes, you're just showing off, really. But anyway, so when I'm doing the Sullivan & Comp thing, I try to stay neutral. I mean, I don't put on my defense hat. I try to get all the issues out there and get all the different points of view. And I've had Adam Domchek on past webinars. Now I have Jake as a fellow defense attorney. Now Jake is a very annoying person to me because he's smarter than I am, and I really hate that. No, so you're like
I'm not paying you to say that anymore, Michael.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm still going to be expecting remuneration. But anyway, your partner is Shaw, Jacobsmeyer, and some other names.
Crain and Claffey.
Right. You guys have a good firm over there, which I also don't appreciate since you're a competitor.
We do our best.
You do, yeah. And you're well known for your emails. I think you still do them, right? It's like anytime there's a court of appeal, a Supreme Court, or a en banc, bam, your email was out to the entire industry, and everybody read your email, and you're just extremely well known in the industry as one of the intellectual leaders.
Well, there's certainly been a little hiatus while I was out of commission there for a period of time.
Yeah.
But plan to start cranking them up again.
But I've always admired Jake. I've worked with him, and I consider you a friend. We've known each other for many years. And we both kind of like the academic side of it, right? And
yeah.
Like the practice, and we've worked on the legislative stuff together some. And so anyway, we've known each other a long time, and his name is really well known in the industry. He's one of the top guys, I think.
I'm also an editor of a competing text.
Yeah, I wasn't going to say anything. I don't know why I like you. There's so many reasons not to. Yeah, you're one of the editors of my competition.
It's a small text.
Small outfit known as Lexus. Yeah.
I actually use Sullivan on law to do a lot of research. So it's much bigger. It has it's a much broader scope.
Oh, yeah.
A lot more detail.
Keep talking. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. Feel free to keep verbalizing how wonderful Sullivan and Company is at any time.
Got my blurb on the back of your book. You don't need more.
So anyway, but Jake, and I were talking, and you had this experience, and we've talked about the law, we've talked about, the medicine, we've talked about employment implications, business decisions, but I don't know anybody that actually had COVID except for you. And your experience was just so compelling that I thought maybe it'd be good to show the community what that experience actually was. Just the experience itself, it's like looking at it from that point of view. So I found it really compelling. So I'm going to sit here and have you tell your story and cross-examine you.
Okay, yeah, it started. We were on a trip in Australia. My wife and I, with a small group. It was actually arranged by a wine club that we belong to. And we've been members of this wine club for a long time. And we've heard about this trip to Australia, that people who own the wine club are Australian, even though they live in Sonoma now. But once a year, they would take about 10 couples, 8, 9, 10 couples to Australia for a 10-day trip. And you would go to very nice restaurants, to different wineries. In our case, we went to the Hunter Valley, which tends to specialize in white wines. And then after a couple of days, we flew to Adelaide and went out to the Barossa Valley, where it's primarily red wines.
When was this?
We got there, we flew there on March 6th. We left here March 6th. We got there March 8th. You lose a day.
So you already knew about the coronavirus out in the world when you went.
We knew about it, but it was not really out there. It hadn't been declared a pandemic yet. The United States declared a pandemic on March 11th. We were aware of it. We were following what was happening in Australia, but Australia had a very low number of cases, in the low hundreds at the time. And we thought, since we're going to be where we started out in Sydney, that's where we flew into. Interestingly, the hotel that we stayed at, which was the Hyatt, the Grand Hyatt, had an experience with the coronavirus a couple of days before we got there. That's where Tom Hanks and his wife were when they were diagnosed with the coronavirus. But they had left by the time we got there. And I think they left by the time any of the people from our group got there. But we were about 20 people, including the winemaker couple, their son and his girlfriend were on the trip also. So there are 8 other couples. We were on about day 7 or 8 of our 10-day trip. One of the people started to feel ill, and they decided they would go to the hospital in their urgent care and get checked out. They said they were pretty certain that it was not coronavirus. She just thought she had either maybe food poisoning or the flu. So they went, got tested. It took about a day or 2 for them to get the results, but the results came back positive. The result was we were all then quarantined. The whole group then was quarantined in the hotel we were staying at. We're staying at a very nice resort in the Barossa Valley. And so the other 18 people were now quarantined in place. The public health department we're in the South Australia, the state of South Australia. The public health department came out and did testing, both the nasal swab and the throat swab, and blood testing. They took vials of our blood, came back. I think at that time, about 13 of us tested positive. Now we've been traveling around, obviously, as a small group. We're on a bus together. This is taking us from various places. We were, sitting at tables very close with each other. So we were obviously in close proximity for a period of time. We really don't know who got it first. Could have, because you can be, as we now know, you can have the virus and even be capable of communicating it, transmitting it to somebody else and not have any symptoms. So the fact that one person tested positive first doesn't mean that that was the one who actually got all the rest of it. It could have been almost anybody on the trip, certainly any one of the first 13. I'd actually been having a cough for maybe 3 or 4 days.
I bet it was the crew because you all came from the States, right? So
yeah,
on the boat when you got there.
We all came from this. We came from different places. Some people live in, one of the couples from Florida, one from Orange County, one from Indiana, one from Texas.
Did you do any tracing to figure out if any one of you had corona at home in the home area before?
It would have been really difficult, I think, to do that because at that point, nobody was really doing anything. They weren't staying in place. All that came about later. When we got to Australia, which was on the 8th, and then our group actually got together, I think, on the 9th or 10th. It was just starting to become sort of a story. So we weren't really giving it a whole lot of thought. I can tell you that when we got on the plane to fly to Australia, we wiped it all down with wipes. My wife had a whole bunch of wipes. I actually bought a bunch of the hand sanitizers in the airport. We spent a good deal of time making certain that we cleaned up, kept ourselves clean. But in terms of social distancing, that was not an issue. That wasn't something that we did. So we're within this small group and we're traveling around. Once they tested us, it took about 2 days to come back with the results. As I said, 13 tested positive. They kept coming back and testing people who didn't test positive. It ended up with 19 out of the 20 tested positive. One person never tested positive. That person even said she used her husband's toothbrush because she wanted to get. She said, if I'm going to get it, I may as well get it as soon as I can because I don't want to get it 5 or 6 or 7 days into this trip or into this quarantine and have to be quarantined another 14 days after that. Because that was like.
So she's trying to get the virus.
She was trying to get it. She never got it.
Dang. Yeah. What a bummer.
So, well, interestingly, because
isn't that crazy? Because it can. Why does she? I mean, I don't know.
After about 4 or 5 days with her husband not getting the virus, they quarantined her in a separate room.
Okay.
And she just never. And they kept testing her. She never tested positive.
You think she's just naturally immune or something? Is that?
Well, there's a story to that. She and her husband had gone on a Christmas cruise in Northern Europe, Germany, Austria, Prague, going down the Danube. And almost immediately coming back from Europe after Christmas, she was sick for about 10 days with very flu-like symptoms, which are sort of the hallmark of this same, the coronavirus. I mean, there's all kinds of other things that people get besides flu-like symptoms. But she had flu-like symptoms. Her husband actually quarantined himself from her because he's a cardiologist and he didn't want to transmit the flu to any of his patients. So he actually slept in a different room from her while she was ill. After we all came back, she got tested again she had the after test where they checked for the antibodies, and she tested as having antibodies twice. So pretty certain that she had antibodies. The question is, where did she get them? It would be hard to imagine that given the number of times they tested her in Australia for the virus, that she would have actually have had it. But the hypothesis is that she actually probably got coronavirus in Europe at the very end of December, unrecognized, and that's where her antibodies came from. And if that's the case, that would be useful in terms of whether you actually get some immunity to it also.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So I think the jury's still out. I mean, the assumption is that if you've had it, you can't get it again, right? But that's not yet scientifically established, as I understand.
I don't think it's been established. Obviously, I would really like to think that it's the case. Hypothetically, you have the more serious your condition, the more antibodies you develop. And my condition ended up being very serious. We'll talk about in a minute.
And you can't give it to somebody, right? If you have the if you've had it and you have antibodies, then you can't give it to somebody else.
No, you can only give it if you have the live virus. And in fact, you're probably from what I understand, you're at your most capable of transmitting within the first 5 days or so of.
You're most infectious before you even know you have it.
Yeah, in the early stages. And
Mhm.
none of us felt, other than the one lady who started to have symptoms, none of us really had much. Like I said, I had a cough, but I would kind of get a cough periodically in the fall from allergies. Now, actually, we're in the kind of, not the fall, I mean, the spring allergies. We're in the fall in Australia. But I assumed it was simply that. I had a kind of a deep cough, no fever, no other symptoms. As it progressed, as I said, all 19 of us ended up being tested positive. They came back maybe 2 or 3 days later and took blood tests again from people. And I think actually the blood test is what made the difference in terms of what happened with me. Because just having the virus, you're starting to feel kind of achy, you're having fevers, but they found something on the blood test that my reaction to the virus was not as strong as they wanted it to be, or as they thought it ought to be. I think it's lymphocytes were not being produced at the rate that they thought they should be, and that's the reason they pulled me into the hospital. They actually took 6 of us to the hospital on March 22nd. One couple was discharged that same day. 2 of the other people were discharged a day later. And then one person stayed in for 3 or 4 days after I did, or after we got there. I ended up staying 29 days in the hospital. The first couple of days, I'm just basically laying in a bed. They're giving me supplemental oxygen, giving me the hydroquinone.
Were you scared? Like, when you first...
I kind of assumed I'd be getting out of the hospital at any day.
Why did you think that?
I didn't feel all that bad. My temperature was fairly low. They were checking my oxygen saturation. It was, in the low 90s, but I was getting supplemental oxygen in increasing dosages. Actually, it'd go up and then they'd turn it down. It'd go up and they'd turn it down, trying to see if I can maintain the oxygen saturation on my own. After about 3, I think the 4th day, they said we're going to...
I'm sorry, but like oxygen saturation, tell me what that means.
Oxygen saturation is the rate at which your oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide in your lungs. And it's one of the measurements of lung function. One of the things that the virus attacks, it creates, it affects the lining of your cells in your lung, and it inhibits your transmission of your exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. So as your O2 saturation goes down, the more serious your condition, your O2 saturation goes down. That's a significant, that's feeding your brain and feeding all your organs with oxygen. And as it goes down, that's a significant health problem.
What kind of drugs did they have you on, if any?
I actually took they were giving me the quinidine for the first couple of days.
What is that?
Along with, that's the hydroquinidine, the stuff that Trump was taking, that everybody was saying he doesn't need to take it. Well, that was the time when they were saying, okay, it may have a beneficial effect. They're not certain. So they were giving it to people who were in the hospital along with an antibiotic, amoxicillin at the time.
What does an antibiotic do against a virus? Why would they even do that?
The reason for the antibiotic is, first of all, they thought that the combination might have some impact, but also one of the really significant things they don't want to have happen if you have the coronavirus is to develop a secondary bacterial lung infection. I'd actually had my pneumonia.
Bacterial pneumonia, something like that, right?
Yeah, a lot of time having a double dose, having both the bacterial pneumonia and the COVID is doubles the amount of problems that you have. Probably,
yeah, it can really kill you. I get it. So it's preventative. And
so it's preventative.
Does it make you feel happy?
And well, yeah. One of the nice things is I never developed a secondary. I never had a bacterial infection. So that probably helped to mitigate the effect of the coronavirus. But
so
after
just laying there, were you bored? I mean, what did you do?
I was reading, I had my Kindle. I was reading books, sending emails to people, talking to my wife, talking to some of my friends and stuff back in the States, calling my
Was
dog.
your wife with you in the room?
No, my wife, no, she's actually back at the hotel during all this time. So from March 22nd until April 18th, she didn't get to see me at all.
But she had it too.
Well, she had it. She was diagnosed with it. She had symptoms. She actually felt worse than I did. She had pretty severe nausea. She had temperature that the temperature would kind of come and go. Sometimes you'd be, at one point I thought my fever had broken and they would be releasing me from the hospital, and then 4 hours later it's coming back again. So they would give you Tylenol with their product is Panadol, and it would lower the fever. But the symptoms she had, one of the things she had is she had a complete loss of the sense of taste and smell for almost 2 weeks.
Wow.
So she couldn't smell anything, couldn't taste anything. And that was something that actually I think it went away just as her quarantine was ending.
You know what? It would be a big opportunity to eat all those vegetables you don't like.
The one thing I will say about the hospital food in Adelaide, by the way, medical care in Adelaide was absolutely superb, just first rate.
Is it socialized? Is it all state?
It's socialized. My co-payment when I left after 29 days was $0.
And what do you think it would have been if it had been in the States? I mean,
maybe $500,000.
$500,000. Not your co-payment, but the total medical bill.
Well, I was in ICU for approximately 14 or 15 days. So after
this impact your opinions on whether or not we should have universal health care in the United States funded by the government?
I'm in favor of universal health care. I'm not necessarily in favor of, like, for instance, Medicare for all. If you look at the countries that have universal health care, there are lots of different models.
Well, I mean, we're all in favor of universal health care. I guess what I'm asking is, did the model that you were presented with in Australia, did you start to like the idea of sort of a state-sponsored medical care?
Well, they also have health plans. I mean, there are people who buy insurance and the employers provide insurance. So it's kind of a hybrid. But it is a state-sponsored plan. The other thing is the hospital was essentially brand new. It's like 2 years old. They completely rebuilt it about 2 years before, so it's completely state-of-the-art. I had 4 or 5 doctors looking at me all the time.
Were you neighbors with Tom Hanks?
No, Hanks had already left, and he was back in the United States. So.
Okay.
And you're all in individualized rooms. I was always in a room by myself, and in particular, once you have the diagnosis, nobody's around you. For them to come in and see you, they had to gown up, mask, gloves, before they could walk in. So it was.
How was the food?
Food was, generally speaking, awful. That's my only complaint about the doctors and nurses were absolutely fabulous. The hospital was really, up to date. And
did you had Jell-O?
They offered me Jell-O, and
a little bit of whipped cream on top.
Whether or not it was partly because it may have affected my taste buds also, but I hardly ever ate lunch or dinner. I had breakfast every day. I had cornflakes and milk for breakfast every day with orange juice, and I could eat that. And obviously, while I'm under, they're feeding me through a tube.
So. Tell me about going under. Like, what caused? You're in a coma for weeks, right?
What happened is after, I think on about the 4th day, they said that they did a CAT scan of my lungs and said that I appeared to be developing some consolidation in the lungs. They could see that there was some patchy areas where it was being infiltrated. So they said, we're going to take you down because we can't give you enough oxygen here. We're going to take you to the ICU. We can give you more oxygen. We can force more oxygen. So I got down to the ICU, and there's a flurry. There's like 6 doctors all around, all gowned, all doing stuff. They're putting in an arterial. I had venous shunts, so I had, the little needle in the arm that they could connect to get blood and to give me IVs. But they did an arterial shunt also, which was not a pleasant experience.
What is that?
They have to get into your artery, which is deeper inside your tissue. So when they take blood from your vein, it's usually very surface tissue. They just have to pierce the wall of your skin and get into the vein. Well, with arterial, they actually have to go down to find an artery and pierce it, and it's a deeper It's deeper. They tried 5 times on both hands to find the artery. They finally found it on my
They're
right.
like stabbing you with needles 5 times in each hand.
Finally, on the last time, he actually put a little bit of Novocaine or something, Mercaine, to numb it. So I didn't feel the last.
I'm not doing that the first time.
I said, you can't you wait till I'm asleep before you do this?
Yeah.
But it, and they actually ended up putting one in my leg. Ultimately, they took it out, put it in my leg while I'm under. But the last thing I remember is they put a mask. I mean, they said, we're going to put you in this. We're going to probably put you to sleep. And I said, and then I called my wife and told her I was going under, and I wasn't certain when I was going to. I didn't really realize, I think at that time, that I was going to have a tube put in. I think I just thought they were going to give me high flow oxygen and keep me still. I wasn't terribly alert at that point. That's part of it too. But I told her I was going on life support because that's what they.
So you didn't know that you were going to sleep and you might never wake up.
It just didn't occur to me. But I think for a day they tried to just simply feed me oxygen through the mask, and then they decided they were going to intubate me. And I was intubated for 12 days. And that's I'm looking at my wife's notes because she's the one who really had to go through the trauma of this, because I'm in La La Land. I have no idea what's going on. I'm in a completely alternate reality during this. But she's getting calls every day from the doctors. He's going up, he's going down. We tried to back off on the oxygen, but we had to up it. One time I bit through my ventilator tube. They had to replace it.
Bit through your ventilator tube?
Bit through the ventilator tube, yeah.
You were just laying there for weeks. I mean, they have to come in and turn you over, keep you from getting bed sores, and I don't know what's going on.
I assume they must.
They have to do exercises with your body.
Yeah, they washed me. They shaved me every day. I had no idea, but I got out, didn't have any. My wife's the one who told me they shaved me every day. It didn't even occur to me. So I'm sure they bathed me also, and took great care. And at one point after I woke up, actually right before I woke up, I think, when I was kind of in a hazy stage and I was unaware, but they were lightening up the amount of sedation they were giving me. And I was sort of responsive to people grabbing my hand or saying, open your eyes. But as one of the doctors said, well, he opened his eyes, but there's no one home, because I was just sedated enough. They put her on an iPad where she could look at me, and she said there were tubes everywhere, which is fairly typical. She knew that would happen because she'd worked in an ICU. She actually worked at the heart transplant unit at Stanford when she was a young nurse. So she kind of had an idea of what would look like. That didn't bother her particularly. But through that whole period of time, literally 14, I'm in the hospital from the 22nd. I went off the ventilator on April 12th, I think. So from that whole time, she's on her own and not really certain, other than what the doctors are telling her, that, we're putting them on the ventilator.
Boy, she must have been really scared.
I think she was very scared.
All alone, and she's sick, and you're in a coma.
Yeah, and now the other people on the trip and the people at the hotel were tremendous. I mean, they gave her a lot of support. One of the people on the trip was an epidemiologist from the peninsula. His wife was an internist. One of our co-members was a cardiologist. One guy who actually left the trip before we did, he left about 5 days into it. He had to get back home. He was an interventional radiologist. So we had all these medical professionals and a lawyer on this trip. And a bunch of people were retired and doing other stuff. But
But wasn't your wife in isolation? I mean, weren't they all?
She's not, but they can talk. One of the people created a WhatsApp chat. So people were messaging back and forth. In fact, we still message back and forth with the same group. We've had 2 or 3 video calls with them.
Yeah, you guys are like Vietnam vets,
That's right. Yeah, we're all
looking through it together. Yeah.
We're all looking forward to maybe getting together at one of the pickup parties that are at the winery, maybe in October or something.
The pickup parties?
Yeah, where you go pick up your wine club wine.
Oh,
and they
okay.
always have a bunch of food and stuff like that for you. It's can be a lot of fun. It's up in Sonoma in Healdsburg, which by the way is one of the great little towns in California.
Yeah.
So for that period of time, from the time they put that mask on me to give me oxygen until I literally woke up after the tube had been removed, I have no recollection of reality. I have recollection of things that I thought were reality at the time. I actually thought that.
Yeah. What was going on? What do you remember about what was going on?
I thought that the hospital I was in, if you went through one door, you're in Australia, but if you walked all the way through the hospital and walked through the other door, you're actually in Las Vegas. Now, why that? And I kept telling my wife in the dream, well, we don't have to fly back to California. We just walk through that door from Las Vegas and then take a plane from Las Vegas home. So
while you're in a coma, you can go to Vegas at will.
I had Easter dinner at a friend of ours. My wife grew up in Las Vegas, and her best friend from 7th grade lives there. Right. And I thought we went to dinner at their house with a whole bunch of other people, but the house that they were in was not even their house. It was in a completely different part, and it was.
Well, I
tried a case in Las Vegas while I was under.
You tried it. What was the issue in the case?
I don't even remember now, but of course I don't practice in Nevada, so there's no way I would be trying a case.
Well, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I don't know everything that your mind was generating.
The first question I asked my wife when I was awake and we're talking, the first thing I asked her is, do we get the 2-bedroom or the 3-bedroom house in Las Vegas? She says, what are you talking about? And I said, well, we bought a house in Las Vegas, but I can't remember if we got the 2-bedroom, the 3-bedroom. She said, we didn't buy a house in Las Vegas. What are you talking about? I'm not moving back to Las Vegas. I thought we bought a house in Las Vegas, so we were going to, retire there in at some point in the future.
Was there ever a point where they told you that you were very near death, or that you died and came back, or something like that?
I don't think so. I mean, they didn't tell me anything in terms of what they told her. They told her there were some times when, I was having a difficult time because they were having a hard. The whole thing is they're pushing oxygen on you. They have to keep you sedated so you don't fight the ventilation. That's part of what happens. So you're in an induced coma, and they're constantly trying to see, okay, can we lighten up on the oxygen? Can we lighten up on the sedation? So this is all to give your body time to fight off the virus.
Right.
I think one of the things that made the difference to me is that I got to the hospital early enough because of the blood test. Now, the blood test showed that there was something that my body wasn't doing to fight off the virus. And that's why they took me to the hospital. I don't think the blood test is a standard protocol for evaluating somebody in the early stages of COVID. I'm sure if you actually get to the hospital, they would probably be doing it. But
without that, you might not be here, because
I might not have gotten to the hospital.
Close call for you.
Because one of the things you have to do is start the interventional stuff, the oxygen flow, the ventilation, before the lungs are so damaged that you can't fight off the virus and get back to it. So I was actually in acute respiratory distress syndrome with getting high flow oxygen, all designed to try and prevent my lungs from becoming infected further with the virus. And over time, you're kind of, they don't put you on it because you're getting better. So for the first week or so, you're heavily sedated, you're getting lots of oxygen, and they're basically saying, nothing's happening. And then they try and bring you out. Sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down. And that's the kind of thing they're telling my wife is, we thought we could bring him out. It looks like we're not. He slid back a little bit. We're going to have to keep him on it for a while longer. While I was in there, 3 other people who actually went on ventilators around the same time I did actually died from coronavirus.
Not from your ship, but just people in the.
Yeah, just people from Australia came in. All of them younger than I was too.
Yeah, you're not as you're a very well preserved and youthful man, but I understand that you're in the high risk age bracket.
I turned 70 in December. In fact, this is partly the birthday for my 70th birthday. It's
how do you look better at 70 than I do at 54?
Actually, at one point
how come you have more hair than me? I don't get that. It's not right.
Well, it's kind of going away. It's getting there.
Yeah, you get no sympathy from over this.
Yeah, but at one point I was talking to the physical therapist that I had, because one thing you have to do is when you come out, I've been lying flat on my back for 14, 15 days between the time I went and the time I came out of the ICU. And even after they took me off the ventilator, it's still a couple days before you really are aware. But I was talking to the physical therapist on the first day, and I said, well, I'm doing pretty well for somebody who's 100, don't you think? And he kind of looked at me, didn't say anything, and then later that night,
thought you were 100?
I can't be 100. How can I be 100? I got to do I did the math. I said, I'm not.
So 100. Your brain wasn't working when you came out of the coma.
No, it was. I
got to ask you. So you didn't have a near-death experience, like you didn't see the shining light or your relatives or anything.
No. I had this huge, long series of dreams.
You were just in Vegas. Yeah.
Well, I was in Vegas. I was on the East Coast. I was in New York for part of the time. I was in Massachusetts. I mean, I was all over the place. I was in Tennessee. We have in-laws in Tennessee. I was in Tennessee. At one point, I was taking these huge logs. I don't even know how I could even handle them, but I took these huge logs up to a place where I understood that they were building a church, and said, you can use these for to build your sanctuary. So whether that's part of the...
I wonder if that's part of the close to death mental.
You kind of wonder, and they said, well, how are we supposed to do this? I said, well, you just have to put it right, and then you have to blow this part up, and everything should fall down in place. And so apparently they did it, and it fell down in place, and they're really happy with it. Then they had an earthquake that destroyed it.
Wait. Okay, the Jungian psychologist in me is coming out now.
It's like I said.
So you would bring timber to build it. This is all in your imagination when you're laying there.
All in my imagination, completely in my imagination.
You gave timber to this church, and if you blew it up right, then the church would all come together, and exactly how it should be.
And they did it, and it worked. And but then I heard
in Jungian psychology, the house is the symbol of the self. So
who knows?
Hey, I want to ask you. This is totally out of line professionally, but what do you think happens when you die? Are you like a guy who thinks there's life after death, or are you do you have opinions about that?
No, we're Christians. I had a lot of people praying for me. I actually had an Indian temple in India. One of my golf buddies from a golf trip I go on every year, which is canceled this year, had his church, had his temple in India, including prayers. But I had people all over the place. So my wife, it certainly was a source of strength for my wife during the time that she was alone and isolated. Because once she left the hotel, once the quarantine's over, she left the hotel. Then now they've got to clean up the hotel. And so, nobody's going there for a while because everybody was stay in place in Australia. Their stay in place dictates were even stricter than they were in California.
Okay.
And South Australia has had, I think, 1 or 2 new cases in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So they've really clamped down and controlled it. But once her quarantine is over, she had to find some other place to go. She moved into a hotel that was about a mile from the hospital where I was staying. So she had like a little corporate hotel place that she went to. But she's there all alone and she moved there like April 5th. And in April 5th and 6th was probably sort of the low time in terms of my physical, what was happening physically. It was probably some of the more dire times.
After she had to be so scared.
Started to get better.
You're out. You're just out, and
I'm out.
Blowing up churches and hanging out in Vegas, but in your brain. But she, that poor woman. She's
24 hours a day. She's
a lot.
She gets 1, maybe 2 phone calls a day. She actually got a phone call she was live streaming the Good Friday service from our church in Lafayette when she got the call from the doctor who told her, we're taking him off the vent today. So that for her, that was a big deal.
It was sort of serendipitous.
It was, yeah. So and then
with her belief system and And I can see how that would be significant to her.
So, Easter was much better for her than, say, Holy Thursday or Maundy Thursday was.
Yeah.
Although I think at that point, on the day before, the couple days before, they had told her, we're lightening up the sedation, we're lightening up the oxygen, but they had done that before and they'd had to reinstate it. But looked like I was getting better at that point. I'm not ever having a secondary infection was a big deal. Not having the bacterial infection probably made it much more likely that I would come out of it.
It's so remarkable to me that you never really were scared, even though you're on the verge of death, because you didn't appreciate like how bad you had it really at any point. And then when they put you under, you didn't appreciate that they were putting you under for indefinitely. And so you just never, until it was over, you never really were facing the prospect of your own demise, really.
No, in fact, because the sort of the sliding downhill was so gradual from the time I got into the hospital until the time they put me under, I never felt like I really was a lot worse. I probably was, but it was so gradual so that when they took me there, I thought, oh, this is just the next step. They'll give me some oxygen and, a day or two, then I'll be able to go home.
You're a frog in a boiling pot.
Before it came to a boil. Yeah. No, it was.
So when you got out of the coma, they kept the ventilator. It's telling me that your brain didn't work properly for a few days.
Well, you're still in intensive care. And they're waiting to see how your delirium goes. And I was, 2 or 3 days, I was still pretty much in a fog in terms of, let's put it this way, I had a very hard time distinguishing from reality versus what had happened in my dream state. Because I still thought some of that was reality. In fact, I remember arguing with one of the nurses. Maybe you just didn't want to leave
Vegas. Maybe you just wanted to stay in Vegas indefinitely.
I was arguing with one of the nurses, and at one point she said that she wouldn't give me my cell phone until I admitted that she knew more about where I was than I did. But I said the staff was phenomenal. They were just really awesome. But after you start to come out of it, and when I realized that we actually didn't buy a house in Las Vegas, and my wife convinced me of that, I said, okay, something was happening that I wasn't aware of. So all these other things that I told you happened, she said, no, never happened. So but at this point, obviously after 2 or 3 days, I can start to figure out the what's real and what isn't.
Well, I remember the first email you sent me. It was maybe 5 or 6 days later, and I had just done our webinar on the governor's order, and you had some opinions.
Well, yeah, let's see.
You were so articulate. I was like, okay, Jake's okay, because I was worried that maybe your brain wouldn't function as good as it does, and
the anticipation once you get out of the ICU, they put you in a COVID ward until you test negative. And so you have to have 2 tests more than 24 hours apart. I had those. I tested negative. While I was in the COVID ward, I started getting some physical therapy because you literally can't walk. I mean, I lost about 20 pounds. I'd lost a lot of muscle strength, and it was difficult. I could kind of get up, and if I had something to hold on to, I could guide myself to the bathroom, do stuff like that. But sometimes it was really nip and tuck whether I'd actually make it. So they brought in the physical therapist, started doing some exercises, got a walker. I couldn't go anywhere when I'm in the COVID room because you can't walk out because you're isolated. So in that room, all I could do is do some exercises and walk around the room a little bit with my walker. I was only in there for like 3 days. And then they moved me one evening, they moved me into a regular ward where they had all kinds of general patients, broken legs and stuff. Once I was there, I got a couple more physical therapy sessions, but basically they just showed me a bunch of exercises, gave me brought the walker up. They had to give me a new walker. I started walking around the halls with the walker for a day or two. Then they brought a cane, what they call a stick. I walked around with the stick for a day. The plan was that I would stay there.
Felt like an applicant.
you're walking around, you're doing the best you can.
Let me interrupt you. There's a story one time, one of my associates, the applicant and the attorney were walking to court, and the applicant says, "Can I talk about my elbow? Can I talk about my elbow?" And the attorney says, "Shut up and concentrate on using your flipping cane." Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt. But here you are, the cane bearer on the other side of it.
Yeah, I started using a cane. Then I was supposed to stay in through. They slated to have me stay through April 24th. So I suppose once I got out of the COVID ward, they were planning on me being there for a week, and then being discharged to a rehab hospital for some physical therapy and some rehab. But after 3 days, I got into the general ward on the evening of the 17th. By the 19th, they said, you're walking well enough that we think we can discharge. I got discharged on the 20th. Unlike a hospital in the United States where they take you out you put you in a wheelchair and wheel you out because they don't want anybody tripping or falling as they're leaving the hospital. I walked out of my room, went down through I was still on the 9th floor, went down the elevator and walked probably 200 yards to get to the front door with nobody around. They didn't. It's just, okay, bye. Have a good time.
Wow. I was wondering, I guess it's just liability reasons they use it. They're so liability conscious here in the U.S. Yeah,
and actually because my wife had been coming in for the last 3-4 days. And when you first go there, you have to tell them why you're there because they don't just let anybody into the hospital. And she told them why we're there. We're at the Americans. It actually became a story in the newspaper about the tourists in the Barossa Valley who tested positive. Really? Oh yeah, it was. They had drones going over the hotel trying to get pictures of us. They had media out at the front gate.
Wow, you're a celebrity. You're
big
in Australia. You're like David Hasselhoff.
Except
Australia, not Germany.
So she had told some of the people at the front door. So when I'm walking out, there's like 8 or 10 of the people who were, like the candy stripers who just kind of help volunteers who help. We're all waiting there, and gave me a standing ovation as I walked out of the
really?
Hospital. It was kind of fun, yeah. The Australians are just really, really nice people. Everybody we met was absolutely as helpful as they could be. The people from the hotel, literally, the hotel was probably 40 miles from Adelaide. Several times people from the hotel, like the manager and the assistant manager, drove into Adelaide to meet with Cindy. They took her shopping to go to the grocery store, just came and sat with her for a couple of hours, had a glass of wine out on the little patio at the place.
Yeah,
they didn't have to do that. The people who transported her from the hotel from the resort to the hotel that she stayed at. When we had to leave our hotel and go to the airport, we called the same people and they drove us and said, no, you're not going to pay us. We're just happy to do it. And that's their business is transport. They have a transport business. They take tourists to the airport when they leave their hotel. They didn't want to get paid.
Yeah.
So, it's just incredible. The people that we ran into.
That is pretty amazing.
So once I got back here, I haven't used a cane since I came home.
I mean, have you been working? What's going on with your firm? Is it like everyone?
I went back to work I got released to go back to work on the 4th. And I got home on the 27th. We left on the 27th, and we actually get home on the 27th before we left.
Yeah.
Because of the time change. So we left at, I think 10 in the morning. We got home at 7 in the morning on the same day. So I stayed at home. I talked to my doctor during that week, and she said, I tried to tell her, I think, they told me in Adelaide, I should, if you're going to, when you think you're ready to go back to work, give yourself another week. So that's what I told the doctor. And she said, no, I think you can go back to work next week.
Well, I mean,
so I went back to work on the 4th.
Isn't swinging a pickaxe, right? I mean,
yeah, no, that's it. I mean, you're sitting,
I'm
working at home. This is my home. This is my family room here. I work on my desk is the kitchen counter. My wife has a desk in an office, but she works from home routinely.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're working at home. I can go into the office, which is only 2 miles away, and get stuff and bring it home. So it's relatively easy. You're right. It's not a physical job at all.
Yeah.
I'm
So
walking,
you can use your brain.
walk 2 miles in the morning.
Yeah. You know, I've been doing that too. It's like what I do is like I'm on a lot of conference calls. So when it's not a Zoom, I just walk.
Yeah.
I'm walking like 2 hours a day, just walking in circles around the block.
I just, we go out, I walk up, there's a golf course about a mile from here, and it's a real upslope. So my goal is to be able to actually get to the golf course and then come back. So that'll be a 2
I thought
mile.
you were going to say you're going golfing, but I guess.
It's a real uphill climb for the last quarter mile.
Well, how are you feeling physically? I mean, and putting your weight back on, or?
I'm trying to keep it off. Probably put a little on because you develop some muscle. My legs are much thinner now than they were. But I feel fine.
Well, you are legendary in the industry for your legs. I mean,
yeah, right. The doctor.
I'd hate to see that change, Jake.
I tried.
We all appreciate them.
I do feel like I'm a little short of breath still.
Oh,
I talked to my doctor about maybe getting a pulmonary function test, and she talked to the pulmonologist at Kaiser, who said, if we do a test now, it'll be abnormal. You had acute respiratory distress syndrome. You're not going to have a normal test. There's no reason to do it. It's not going to change what we do for you.
How long until they can figure out?
Breathing exercises and exercise.
When would you be considered permanent and stationary? What's the anticipated BNS date there for Jake?
Well, I mean, from the standpoint, I'm probably close to maximum medical improvement right now. I'll get slowly better, I think, over time. My lung function should get better, but it's probably not going to be dramatically different. From a physical standpoint,
has this experience, affected your thought process regarding, permanent disability residuals and or the expected possible permanent disability residuals in COVID cases?
It probably from the standpoint that I've gone through it. I've been almost as bad as you can get. Not quite. I mean, there are people who are worse off than I was. There are people who've been on it on an event for much longer than I have, or who have the double crush syndrome but I'm in the bottom 1 or 2% of reactions to
people that didn't die that went through this. Yeah.
And I'm doing pretty well. I feel like I'm probably at like 90 to 95% in terms of functioning. So I told you before when we were chatting before this, I remember my passwords to get into my computer and to get into my billing system and to get into stuff. So if I can remember my passwords, I figure I'm mentally acute enough to do stuff. I can remember my files, remember cases without too much.
I was joking with you before the show. I said, as long as you can still be your clients, you serve a purpose.
Right. That's right. But it is a function.
From your partner's perspective, I guess, anyway.
Being able to remember that stuff. Now, part of it is, you go away on a vacation for 2 weeks. It can take you a little while to get back into the swing of things from when you come back. Well, I was gone for 52 days.
Yeah.
So it's taken a little while to get into the swing of being able.
Yeah, I bet your partners really had to pick up the slack and had to without you, and you were disconnected from a lot of the current events and projects and thought process, especially because, probably that's been, if it's like my experience for your partners, it was maybe the most intense 60 days of management experience that they've ever had.
It might very well have been. It was pretty challenging. They covered for me pretty well on my files, and I'm trying to pick them up and keep going. I'm probably going to move some files and probably try and keep reduce my caseload a little bit, but not particularly. I've still got a few new files that have come in. In the last 2 weeks, I think I've actually settled about 6 or 7 cases, got rid of cases. So I'm trying to move stuff through as obviously that's what our clients always want. Get the files closed, get them out of the inventory. So no, I feel like I'm doing very well. I feel like I'm very, very lucky because there are obviously people who don't do as well. I have seen, particularly on TV, people who come off the vent who are in a wheelchair having a harder time. I barely even had a sore throat from 12 days on the vent. It was a little bit raw, but not much. Within 2 or 3 days, that's fine. My appetite came back pretty well. Didn't have any problem. I have one oddity. When I went to the hospital, I had this patch on my thigh that would periodically feel like it was on fire. I mean, it was really like a real neuralgia. And it would bother me, and it would stay there for a while, and I kind of move around, and eventually it would kind of go away, and then periodically it'd come back and it'd go away. And when I woke up from the coma, I noticed that I have a numb spot. That patch where I had the burning sensation is numb, it's still numb. And I can push on it, I can put a pin on it, and I don't feel the pin. I mean, I can feel it on the muscle underneath, but it's numb. So I've got this little patch that's like 8 inches long and about 6 inches wide. That's kind of an oval that's just numb. And I can only think it's a consequence of the virus. So it's, a lot of people had very, very different reactions. They said my wife got nauseated. I think 2 people got very seriously nauseated. The others didn't.
Yeah. I mean, what about the other people on the boat? Did no one else was on a ventilator?
Oh no, nobody else was on a,
no
one person was in the hospital for about 4 days, I think, because with fever. And then they went back to the hotel, and then ultimately went back to the United States.
And this wasn't a youthful group either, right?
No, I mean, almost everybody is, I think one guy turned 50. So there was one couple that was a little bit younger, but almost everybody else was in their 60s and 70s. So, I was probably sort of at the upper end, but it was a pretty flat curve from that standpoint. I think there are quite a number who are right around the same age. So, yeah, I mean, I was 70. I didn't really have any health issues. I'm not hypertensive, diabetic, any of those things. I clearly was overweight. But other than that, now I actually became hypertensive at the hospital. But since I've come back home, I've been able to go off the blood pressure medication. My doctor took me off of it. So my blood pressure returned to normal. One of the things that did happen is while they were giving me the malaria medication, I actually developed a left bundle branch block, which is one of the reasons I stopped it, because I had an EKG that became abnormal. So the thought is that having stopped it, I'm going to have an EKG in a couple weeks. They think it'll probably be gone. There's nothing you do for it. It's not a particularly onerous condition, but it's a finding. I guess it can lead.
Yeah, there can be permanent stuff, I guess.
Yeah, so we'll see. At one point, they said I was having some issues with my kidney, that they were concerned that I was having some kidney problems. Those went away after a couple days, and my kidney function ended up being fine. So it messes around with internal organs. One of the guys on the trip
too, that messes with it as well as. But I was going to say we just have a few minutes left on our hour, so I wanted to make sure you had a chance to philosophize a little bit. What mindsets? Now here you are, you're leading a law firm and helping lead an industry in a COVID environment. You've had this experience. Have you had any? Do you have any particular thoughts or philosophies or points of view or orientations that have formed from this your personal experience that may influence how you are professionally or just in general?
Well, I think one of the things that I'm doing more perhaps than I did before this is I think I'm reaching out to family and friends more. I think I appreciate the support. There was one of the things that happened my first week back was I was going to have a conference call, a Zoom call with my partners. We're going to have a little partnership meeting. Turns out it wasn't a partnership meeting. It was a Zoom call with about 20 industry leaders and workers' comp who had all been following the tail because my wife is sending emails out. There were probably 200 or 300 people that were getting these emails. She was sending it to maybe a dozen people, and then they're distributing it. All welcoming me back, and they had a little PowerPoint. It was really, it was very moving. It was really touching. And we've had Zoom calls with my family members, all my brothers and sister and their spouses. Obviously, the people on the trip, we've done it. I think I appreciate the people around me more, particularly for the support they showed my wife, which was for her much more traumatic than it was for me. You have to look at it. I was in La La Land for 14, 15 days. Well, she's worried whether I'm going to, live or die. So it was very traumatic for her. And then even when I'm coming out of it, it's, okay, he's coming out of it. What's it going to be like when he comes out of it? Is he going to be all there? Or is he going to
be the same guy?
Yeah. So it's
you come away with a new appreciation for the life in a particular relationship.
I'm certainly exercising more too. I can tell you that. So
the else has got more important. My alarm's going off, so we're gonna have to stop. But folks, listening to this, and as always, if you have any comments or questions, you have my information, and I'll forward anything to Jake. You want to say anything or ask anything, or ask or say anything to me too, go ahead and feel free to communicate with us as always. I want to say thank you, Jake. I mean, it's a personal experience and you're willing to share it with the industry. And it's certainly, I think, interesting to me and interesting to a lot of people, because we're all living in an environment where we don't have COVID, but we are isolated, right? But something like this is really, I think, helps to show everybody the reality of it. And that's important. So it's
the reality is I probably know more people who've had it now than almost anybody you'll meet, because we all had it in Australia. Most people I talk to don't know anybody who's had it.
Yeah, I don't. I do. Oh, you're the only one I know.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Jake. I mean, I think it's a worthwhile thing that you've done here, and I want to say thanks.
Well, appreciate the opportunity. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Thanks, Jake.